Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. As part of the Miami University Alumni Association's webinar series, today we present 5 ways experience design can revolutionize your organization. Your instructor today is Dennis Cheatham. Dennis Cheatham is Graduate Director of the MFA in Experience Design at Miami University, the only distance learning MFA in Experience Design in the world. His research focuses on ways design thinking, processes, and outcomes affect and are influenced by human perception, emotion, and actions. Prior to his academic appointment, Dennis worked as creative director, interaction, and experience designer for 15 years in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Welcome to Dennis today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Just a note to our viewers, questions were collected during registration, and Dennis will attempt to address some of those throughout the webinar today. You'll also have the option to ask questions during the webinar by clicking Ask a Question at the bottom of your screen. Please note that in the interest of time we have available, we may not get to every question. Today's webinar will last about an hour, including time for those questions and answers. And with all of that, I will turn it over to Dennis. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I will bring my slides up here and we'll present and we will get going. So some of you may be even just thinking who are unfamiliar with the concept of experience design. What the heck are we talking about here? Well, we're going to dig into that, and let me try that again. You know, I seem like a really accomplished online educator now, don't I? All right. So I am the, I direct the Experience Design MFA here at Miami. And our MFA is a distance learning program. So with the pandemic, we are still smooth sailing and pretty used to doing some distance learning. Let me tell you about what we focus on here in Experience Design, what this really means. So Pine and Gilmore, this is like 1999. A couple economists, of course, if you're an economist out there, props to you. They're the first people who start talking about experience design in 1999. And they talk about how experiences are really where our organizations and corporations should focus, that the greatest opportunity for value creation is not just in making services or making better products, but in creating an experience that users, that people who buy these products and use these products will want to use and return to. So they give this example in their book, and I think it's a great way to frame the power of experiences. So they talk about coffee beans. Depending on what time zone you're in, you may be sipping some right now. We've got these raw coffee beans. They're a commodity. And they're like, you know what, 4 cents a pound, something like that. So once we roast them, though, this image always makes me like, I can smell it, right? Now it's a good. It's gone from commodity to good, and its price goes up per pound. We're getting up into like the, 25 or 17 cent per pound category. Then when we brew it, granted, this is not the most beautiful cup of coffee. Now we've gotten it up to 98 cents when we're consuming this coffee. But what happens when we take it to the experience level? One of these, what we're all willing to pay like $4 for one of these. So when you elevate what you offer to an experience, then you can charge more. And Pine and Gilmore touched on this, but I think they touched on how the power of experiences can go far beyond just charging more for your product. So as designers, we tend to focus on products a lot, but the most scientific thing I have to say about that is no. Let me tell you why. So we talk about design and we focus on outcomes all the time. Architects are about crafting environments, structures. We focus on apps and we focus on devices first in interaction design and graphic design. It's publications and industrial design. We're creating objects. But each of these starts with the item instead of starting with the experience. So in experience design, we emphasize the experience first, the people which definitely shifts the design activity into a little bit of a different realm than just making great products, though those are still valuable. So when we focus on the people and their unique experiences and the stories that they encounter every day, the pain points they run into, the proud moments, the wishes that they had, then we can focus on experiences when everything happens in context. And those contexts that surround experiences really affect those experiences. So, for example, in a waiting room, our attitude about our healthcare may be a little bit different than when we're at home. If you're on a plane, different context, different kind of experience, and one that hits close to home. When you're on campus in a face-to-face class, it's a very different experience than when you're learning online, like we have been this year. So the context, the conditions that surround the experience definitely matter. So we focus on the people as experience designers. We focus on the context as well. And the design is still very much part of it, the products, services, and systems we create. So these three things, context, people, and design, all make up an experience design scene. So let me talk about those 5 things you came here for so we can learn how to think, feel, and act like an experienced designer. So number 1 of the 5 things is reframing. So I want to take a little time here to reframe your concept of design. I want you to think about design a little bit differently, because you may be considering design as this water bottle or as the app that you're watching this on. But experience design mindset is a little bit different and can unlock your organization. So Herbert Simon, a cognitive scientist and wide range of disciplines, wrote this: everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. Let's break that down. Everyone's a designer who makes anything that tries to improve a situation. So think about yourself. Have you ever made a poster maybe for a lemonade stand, or have you ever implemented a procedure perhaps for people to volunteer for something? Well, if you've ever made one of those, you're a designer. And I'll tell you, designers love to tell people you're not a designer because you don't have these skills. Don't believe them. If you've created anything that attempts to change a situation into a preferred one, you're a designer. Let's talk about that. So every design's an intervention then. The last summer, when I was traveling, you may have seen some of these if you've gone to a hotel. This is a design and it's an intervention. So in your organization, when you need to implement a service or a product, think of it as an intervention. What are you trying to intervene for your people? What are you trying to change? When you reframe your thinking around design as an intervention, it can unlock new ways of designing products, services, and systems that hit that experience level. This item here, its intervention is, I feel unsafe with the cleanliness of my hotel room. This design's put in place. Oh, my hotel room's been sanitized. I feel a little safer. Not every person believes this intervention, but some do. And certainly early in the pandemic, we gravitated towards the need for cleanliness, and this intervention worked quite well. Second, think about activities, not outcomes. So a way of reframing this number 1 point: people complete activities. Couple good examples for you to dig into. I'm going to give you a ton of resources today. I won't be able to dig into them. Don Norman, Nielsen Norman Group, and Christensen and others talking about activity-centered design and jobs to be done. So they're reframing this idea that people don't want products and services and systems. They want to get stuff done. They want to do something. Here's an example from Walt Disney World where I teach an experience design course. By the way, it is open to anyone. If you want to come study experience design with me at Walt Disney World, it'd be fun. So this is an image actually of my daughter on waiting in line for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. If you've ever been in Florida in July or August or just about any month of the year, it's really hot. Just kidding. For those of you in Florida, I know it actually gets It actually gets down to like 60 there. Anyway, when you're waiting in line for an attraction, you're doing an activity. You're waiting in a queue. You're waiting to get on a ride. That's the activity. What Disney implemented here, what the Imagineers have put into place is while I'm waiting in line, I have stuff to do. In this case, you can actually push down on this TNT kind of device and it will shoot water out at folks who are riding the ride. So the intervention is people are waiting in line and they're hot and they're bored. We wish that they were having fun even while they're waiting in line to reduce their pain. Intervention, this TNT object, this TNT device. The activity, waiting in line. So for your organization, unlock your potential by not just thinking about what you want to solve, but think about what your people are trying to get done. And then you may design something that will align with that activity and help them to get that activity done in a way that's memorable, where the experience stands out. Another one here, if you're cooking, OXO Good Grips, fantastic devices designed for people who have a difficult time manipulating devices, specifically for cooking. The activity, I need to cook, I need to peel potatoes. The intervention, a design that is specifically built for a hand size or specifically for folks who have a hard time holding on to very small devices for different reasons. So ask yourself the question in your organization, your corporation, or whatever, what are your people trying to accomplish and how can you intervene? When you think about activities and interventions, you'll design in ways that are more inventive and innovative and actually may align with your users' preferences and needs. Okay, number 2, research. So research is this key to innovation. Your people, when I say your people, the people who are your students or the people who are in your organization, your employees, your customers, they will not walk up to you and tell you, hey, Dennis, one thing that really frustrates me about your pizza shop is the pizza boxes are, they're just not really fun to use and they don't keep the pizza very warm. They won't walk up to you and tell that. Maybe a few will. But research gives you an insight into what people need and want. So to give you an example, I'm leading a group here at Miami, interdisciplinary group, several researchers, and we're looking at end-of-life choices. So that's advanced care planning and other means for folks to record their wishes for what should happen if they cannot speak for themselves, if they're in the hospital or if they are actively dying. So we didn't want to assume what people needed. Our goal is to get people to record these wishes. So, and we're specifically working with marginalized groups in Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky. So we don't really know what they need. We don't know what they prefer. And right now, a lot of systems aren't working at getting folks to record these things. Heck, folks who have the means oftentimes don't record their end-of-life choices. So our research has been going into and working with folks who live in assisted living communities, adult day centers, et cetera, before the pandemic hit. And what we learned, what we went into is like, oh, folks want to record what they wish, and they're probably going to think about, you know what, I got that couch I want to take care of and give it to my sister, and I've got a will that says that I want money set aside. No. The research revealed things like in their last moments, people want good music. They want their pets and plants to be around them, or at least to know they're cared for. When we asked folks, what matters to you? You're expecting them to talk about money. They're saying, I want to make sure my dog is okay. If I can't get home from the hospital, how can I make sure that my dog is taken care of? That's epic, right? Research revealed what people needed and what we needed to design for. And it's something we didn't expect. So when you implement research, then you can discover those needs. Another example, I did some work at Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. I spent some time with some researchers. This was in my own graduate study and the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit there at Cook. And we spent some time. I spent an overnight shift and a day shift, and we were looking at how to improve the pediatric intensive care unit experience. And what we learned was not that communication needed to be improved, or that they needed a bigger bed, or that the building was the space was too small or cramped. One of the things we discovered was parents and guardians, when they came in with their child who is seriously ill, these parents and guardians needed a safe place to go so they could call their loved ones and say, hey, I need a bag of clothes. I'm going to be here for the night. John's hurt, but I need some clothes and a toothbrush, and I need to be able to care for them. So what we discovered was we need to create a safe place for those who are caregivers, so they can get the materials they need and get back to caring for their child and dealing with a very difficult emotional situation. These are some notes from some of those observations. So in your organization, you may not be able to take the time to one-on-one interview your customers or those in your organization, or do other methods like observations or focus groups. An example with some actually XDers that were working with a group a few years ago. But if you've been to IKEA and others, even at the most basic, getting some kind of feedback on how was your experience today and tap, or if you've been in an airport restroom, or if you've seen like Google Maps where you can tap, how's your experience today? There are simple ways and clear methods you can use to get that information, to learn what your users are experiencing and learn what they wish they had. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all of that today. However, we have a course. I teach design research methods in experience design. All of our courses are open to any learners if you want to study those, but there are a lot of methods you can use to still get that information to create great experiences, and let people share what they need and what they struggle with in their own words, to be able to share in their own way, which is powerful for experiences, because the issues people face are so nuanced and specific to their situation. So number 3, co-design. So when we get out of our heads as designers that we know it all and that we have it all solved, we're freed up to involve people who use design in the design process. A lot of times we talk about it in the XD program and our undergraduate program in communication design. As a designer, you're a facilitator. You're really not an expert. We can't make for people. We have to make with people. So creating together allows us to create outcomes that infuse users' needs and preferences and viewpoints into the items themselves. That makes for way more relevant outcomes. So fantastic book that touches on this. A couple design researchers, Liz Sanders and Peter Fanstapper's Convivial Toolbox. I highly recommend it. Gets a little bit academic at times, but it really addresses and gives a lot of examples of how we can co-create outcomes. So let me tell you a story. So Crown Equipment Corporation here in Ohio, one of our students in the XD program did an internship with them, wound up getting a job with them for a while, and he did a research project with them. So this is a photo of a lift truck, a forklift that you'd see in a warehouse. And Crown manufactures a lot of heavy equipment like this, not this specific model. So I'll give you an example of co-creation that was brilliant that Crown shared with me years ago. So they are a multinational corporation, and they wanted to learn how operators use their equipment and ways they can improve that equipment for different needs. But they ran into a challenge. They were going to nations and parts of the world where these lift truck operators did not speak English. So how do you co-create something with people who are highly skilled at operating this machinery, but they don't speak your language? Want to know the answer? Stickers. There it is. What researchers did at Crown was, through an interpreter, they were able to to ask operators, what do you like about your lift truck, and what frustrates you? And here's a sticker that's a happy face, a bunch of stickers that are happy faces, and a bunch of stickers that are sad faces. Will you stick what makes you happy about it onto the actual lift truck? Because they're standing in front of a lift truck, the one that these operators actually used every single day, and said, label the parts that are great, that make your job better, and label the parts that frustrate you. Those lift truck operators took those stickers, put them on different places, and it was the beginning of a conversation about, okay, you put a sad sticker here. Tell me about that. And then they got the deeper story. So co-creation can use things like stickers in very simple ways, but can reveal amazing ways for you to create, prototype, and test outcomes and improve your product offering. So we're doing the same thing with the End of Life Choices project, where participants in the research are sharing their wishes and they're sharing their insights. And then we're moving on to creating outcomes with them that we can test that will help them to record their wishes and give them dignity. So Post-it notes, stickers, sheets where people are writing on, cardboard prototyping, these are all ways that you can involve people in co-creating with you. It makes people part of the process and it empowers them. This semester, I'm also teaching a course called Designing for Access. And this semester, we have been reading Building for Everyone, which takes Google's product inclusion team, their methods, and makes them fairly easy to understand and implement into our organizations. So product inclusion is an exciting way, first off, that Google's found they can grow their business. So it's like inclusion sounds like the right thing to do. We should have equal representation. We should have products that are accessible to everyone. But it's also good for business too. It's a great book and I highly recommend it. And I appreciate that Jean-Baptiste also addressed that in some organizations, it can be difficult to convince managers and others to put inclusion first. She addresses that in the book, but she also talks about co-creation and Google's design sprint methodology that involves all of the right people, the stakeholders in the designing process. Co-creation, it removes the designer from saying, I know best, and makes it a team effort. It'll unlock your organization because what you make will be relevant and shared because everyone who uses the product is involved in making it. So number 4, system. So we're going to climb up the ladder at the 30,000 foot level. That's a really tall ladder. Maybe we're getting in a plane that has highly filtered air. And systems is number 4. I want to challenge you. If you're running into a situation in your organization that is causing a problem, there's probably more to it. So let me talk a bit about that. Donella Meadows wrote a book called Designing for Thinking in Systems. And it's a brilliant book, again, giving you a ton of resources today for you to dig into. She was an environmental scientist and was dealing with systems on an environmental level. So we're talking about environmental impact, but she still talks about the flow of information, the flow of money, the flow of people. All of these are systems. And one charge that she put out in her book that I think is so powerful for organizations to design more effective outcomes is this idea: don't get stuck on the event. Let me tell you what that means. She talks about how when an organization runs into a problem or when we see an issue, another cue right here, another line, we tend to focus on the event. When something goes wrong in your organization, when there's a frustration, a breakdown, when communication breaks down, when customers complain because they can't get what they need, when your nonprofit is having a hard time finding more volunteers, we tend to focus on the event. And designers are very guilty of, we need to make a poster, or we need to put out a new app, or let's design something new. Donella Meadows pumps the brakes for us And she reminds us, a systems thinker doesn't focus on the event like this line. They don't say, okay, let's jump straight to fixing this. A systems thinker backs away and they look at the underlying issues and the historic issues, the trends over time, backs away because sometimes the event that's happening, the issue your organization is facing, is a symptom of something far further back in time, or a decision or a process that's put in place way before you've run into the issue you're running into. So my hope is you've got something in mind right now to consider, that when you run into that issue in your mind, the problem you're facing, stop, back up, and study what caused this and really take the time to dig in. In experience design, we focus on that bigger picture, and that's definitely a way your organization can innovate, by just looking for the real problem and the real issue that may be underlying. So I worked for Southwest Airlines for a while, just for a short stint as a writer, actually. But I learned so much from that organization, and they are so systems oriented, as is any airline. When you are moving people, equipment, bags, mail, sometimes animals, all kinds of stuff from one place to another, it is an entire system. And when one part of the system faces a problem, it oftentimes messes up the rest of the system. In an airline's case, when weather hits a city, it definitely impacts how aircraft are trapped in that city and they can't move, and it affects the entire system. Even if you don't run an airline, your organization is a system. And I like how Donella also talked about systems inside systems. When you take the time to examine all the parts, sometimes you can discover where those breakdowns are. In this is a do not resuscitate order, a copy of one. End of life choices and planning is definitely a system that involves many different issues. We have financial issues, we have emotional issues, spiritual issues, we have logistics, we have assets, lots of different components that go into that system. Another example, to give you a Disney example that I think is brilliant systems thinking. If you've ever been to Walt Disney World, stayed in the resort, then you likely have had one of these magic bands on your arm. Magic bands open up your resort room. They are also your theme park ticket. But then they can also do some other things. Of course, your credit card is tied to it, so you can buy with it, which could get people in trouble, but it is convenient. And then if you buy a photo package while you're riding a ride, or when you walk up to a photographer, they can take a picture of you and you can just beep your magic band and it gets added to your body of photos, your kind of photo album for your entire vacation. Disney brilliantly designed this item to reduce the frustrations of like hanging onto a ticket and your room key and all those different parts, and they consolidated them into one spot. Here's the systems thinking, though. If you stay in the resorts, you can book a fast pass. You can book a time to ride different attractions, and you can reserve those in advance. I'll tell you, it's a mad dash. Like, I'm up at like 4:30 a.m. Like, gotta get Space Mountain, gotta get Space Mountain. Come on. But here's the magic. When people wear a magic band and when they have a fast pass, they feel special. Hey, I got a fast pass for Space Mountain. I've got a time reserved just for me. My name's on that. That's pretty cool. But Disney parks can also determine what rides are open to fast passes and what rides are not, what attractions will allow people to ride them and what not when they do the reservation. So Disney parks can actually manage where people are throughout a park by having one attraction open for fast passes and another one not. They can manage the flow of people from one attraction to another. It reduces congestion. It manages flow. It's a systems solution. But guests wear one saying, I got to pick out my color, have my name on it. This is so cool. Disney's awesome. And Walt Disney World is thinking, we get to have a better guest experience because we're managing the system. So not too different. So in XD, we travel to different locations in the United States. One of the locations we went to was New Orleans a few years ago, and we were here in the lower Ninth Ward. A different kind of systems problem where a canal was built that divided the lower Ninth Ward from New Orleans. And this was, I think this was back in the 50s or so. The canal was helpful for commerce and trade, but it had negative consequences that drastically impact the entire system, especially residents in the lower Ninth Ward. So systems and examining systems sometimes allows you to avoid some problems that a decision could make because you're examining all of the parts. You're backing away. Unfortunately, we've seen examples of systems having drastic effects on people's well-being, and then their buying power, their experiences. Sometimes systems can be for great effect. Here at Zion National Park, where we've also traveled a cohort with XD, where Zion has chosen to take away people's freedom. They will not allow you to drive deep into the park at Zion. You have to ride a shuttle. But by reducing freedom, by creating a transportation system, they've also reduced pollution. They've also helped protect the park. And guests are cool with it. When you don't have a choice to drive into the park, and I don't know if you've driven around other parks where, especially Yellowstone, which can be quite congested and can take away from the experience when you're trying to find a parking spot. Guests at Zion are okay with it. They're used to it, maybe a bit irked, but it's better for the environment. It's a better total experience. And it presents a better natural experience, the whole purpose of the national park. So number 5, our final one, we just got to 30,000 feet. Now let's get down to the tiniest, most close and personal one, getting personal, focusing on the experience. When your organization focuses on designing a very personal outcome, those who use your product, service, or system will feel special, but also focusing on getting personal forces you to get to know your people, to know their background and their needs and their preferences. This applies some research, but on a very close and up close and personal way. So in these cases, when you get personal, the details are the design. That's I believe a Charles Eames quote, a mid-century designer. The details make it special and make it personal. They define the experience. Sometimes the details in getting personal can be as broad as these. Again, you've probably used like Google Maps or something where, how's your experience today? And people can participate and share their emotions. But I'll give you some other examples of some very personal outcomes. This is at a restaurant up in Detroit that was a Ford Motors inspired restaurant and bar. And if you've ever worked on any kind of car, at least that's I worked on a 1965 Mustang a bunch, so I know these really well. So you've got a car part wrapped around a rag that you'd see in a shop as a napkin. So that's a total like experience design and really high branding kind of way of saying, if we want to make an auto themed restaurant, how about we just make the napkins rags, and then we make the napkin ties items that you would use when you're working on a car. It's a very personal way to go. They didn't have to go fancy like this. It was more expensive than implementing something that was pre-made. But I don't know though. Shop rags and ties like this may have been a pretty inexpensive way to go, but it certainly was personal and made the experience, well, I'm showing you now, aren't I? Must have been pretty special. This device is in my bathroom, just on the other side of this wall. And when our family brushes our teeth, it becomes almost a competition that if you brush for 2 minutes, this Oral-B sensor will give you a smiley face. You didn't have to do that, right? Could just be a timer counting down, 2 minutes, teeth are clean, move on. But the smiley face makes it personal. It makes it fun. It gives you a little reward. I know maybe a smiley face won't make my kids brush all the way to 2, but I kind of like seeing it light up. And if you go like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it starts winking at you. So I'm like, ooh, I can get the winking today. I'm such a sucker for smiley faces like that. Here's an example too at a restaurant that in Cincinnati that I went to. Yes, I was that weird guy in the bathroom taking pictures. I had to like double check to make sure nobody was around but this one. But it surprised me when I saw this. You are the best thing that can happen to anyone. Like, who puts that on a mirror? I'm glad they did. That was special. A neat little detail that was just a pretty easy piece of vinyl they could put down that created an experience. Justice, attention detail getting personal. So Justice in one of their recent catalogs, I think this is from last year, showed girls of a diverse range and one girl who has Down syndrome. So getting personal, showing people in their situations and the way they are in all of their uniqueness and designing outcomes that hit them where they are. Ordering on Zappos, you can actually order by emoji. I have never gotten a really successful shoe selection by shopping with emoji, but some people that may be their bag. If you go to REI, you'll see the pulls on the doors actually are made to look like they are axes you'd use when you're doing high adventure. Google, when you search Hanukkah cards at holiday time, the entire interface is different. When you use the word Hanukkah, the interface changes. It's special. It's personal to that person who is inputting information. And I'll give you another Disney example. This is Typhoon Lagoon at Walt Disney World. And let me tell you, as an example of how your organization can do design in a very personal way that's pretty cheap. So when you walk up to the park, you'll see, by the way, that wave pool's amazing. If you've been on that, it is awesome. I mean, sick waves. Okay. Not for the faint of heart. But you'll see are these signs. Notice how they are chalkboard signs. So first off, they feel fun, right? Like chalkboard signs show up in places that we have fun when we do, and they match the brand. So for brand junkies out there, you're like, this is on brand, on point. But there's one little detail that made it very personal and very special. And you'll see in the top left-hand corner here, the big kahuna of the day is Alexis. And my guess is Alexis wrote her own name there, her or his name, whomever Alexis is. They wrote their own name. So Disney didn't have to put this big kahuna thing there, but it did make it personal and special. And even if I'm not Alexis, when I see this, I'm like, oh, some kid had their day made. That's super cool. I want to be the big kahuna. Like someday. I'm trying. I still haven't done it yet. So know your people. Make their day. When you apply experience design to your organization and when you get personal, what you produce, the products, services, and systems that are very detailed and specific to your users, to the people who experience them, those people will remember it. They will remember how special you made them feel. They'll remember the experience. And like Pine and Gilmore said in Experience Economy, and what they were touching on, and I mentioned at the beginning of this, experiences are what people come back for, and an area for growth and an area for change. I'll tell you, I don't know if you've had the same experience I have, but I'm not terribly good at learning when people tell me to do something. But when I've experienced something, maybe had a bad experience or a consequence, I'm far more likely to learn. If people in your organization, your employees, your customers, whomever can have a great experience, they'll be more likely to come back and they'll be more likely to remember you. So this is a sixth one, 5 point, no, it's totally sixth one. Maybe it's like the 19th one because this is a big one. Let me talk about the big shebang. I'll briefly go into the complexity of experiences. Now that we've touched on our 5, let me show you just how complex an experience is in something that we use in XD. So there's a tool I've developed, a framework called Aspects of Experiences for Design. So the challenge is in our program has been, okay, when we're designing for experiences, and oftentimes experience design is referred to as customer experience design, some organizations call it that. Like, what do we focus on when an experience is like everything? It's all of these real and perceived components. So this framework touches on aspects of experiences that we should consider when we design. And I'm not going to dig into these. You're like, Dennis, we have like 6 minutes left before Q&A time. This is like a week of material. But just to give you an idea of experiences, this chart shows context, people, and design, just like we started out with. In the context column, there are concerns that affect people in your organization, like the laws that are enacted wherever your organization is. They can define what kind of experience people have. People and their relationships, their race, the condition they're in, if they have if they have a hip that is broken, other details like that can drastically affect their experience. When we examine experiences at this highly complex level, and when we try and check off and look into each of these aspects, they can reveal a lot about how we design, what challenges we should be facing or we should be addressing, and how we can design our systems to work with people the way they are. And you'll see here, people are both physical and people are relational. Let's go to that even deeper level. Issues like social norms in a context, those way we're supposed to behave, can drastically impact your service. If your organization tries to go into a community where social norms that are in place, where ways you should behave, do not align with your product offering, you're going to have a hard time getting any kind of traction. So that's why considering social norms is valuable. In some of these others, people's attitudes when they use your design. If you've ever dropped kids off at daycare, you know that it's not something you just want to hang around and have it take forever, especially if your kid was kind of like mine, where you're like, oh gosh, I got to do the drop off quick. I know this is going to be another crying session. The attitude, a person's attitude when doing that activity is such that if we could design check-in to be quick, to be effortless, to be efficient, it would probably make that experience a lot better. So you'll see how focusing on some of these aspects can help us to understand our product offering better and also understand the people who use our outcomes more effectively. So quickly, an example like is in our end-of-life choices project. When we look at people, a person's age and the culture they come from can drastically impact the way they will record their wishes or will even want to even talk about their wishes. Here with Alexis and the Big Kahuna, the actor is design and the characteristics of that design, where it's material, the chalkboards, and the style, fun and beachy, made the experience special. When my daughter was blasting people with water over on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the actor, a person, my daughter, and we're at the stethoscope level, a very deep level here, the sensations and mood. When you're waiting in line, the sensations are, I'm hot, I'm sticky, oh, it's kind of stuffy in here. And mood, which oftentimes is, I just want to get to the front of the ride. I am so tired and I am really not feeling very good. If we're attentive to these kinds of aspects, what we design can address them, can try and meet people where they are in a situation. And then lower ninth ward, actors' context and that context location. Told you that example of that, of the canal that was developed and the specific location impacted people where they live and their background and their culture, and unfortunately negative consequences from a design decision. So if you want to dig into some of this really complex stuff for aspects of experiences for design and explore it, I've developed a website where you can do that, along with tools that you could use while you're in the field to record how a certain design impacts an experience or a certain person's background can present an opportunity for design. Experience design starts with the people. And that's, I think, one of the magic things for your organization. Too often we focus on our product. We focus on making our product great. And that's good. We should design great products, services, and systems. But if we don't back away to the experience, if we don't consider the complexity of that experience, and then apply things like research, co-creation, look at the systems level, get personal, and think like designers with activities. If we don't do these things, then we will wind up making the same products, services, and systems we've always made. We may miss the experiences that we could create for our users and for folks who use our outcomes. So if you'd like to learn more about XD, our web address, xd.miamioh.edu, we've got more information there about the program. We'd love to talk with you about it. And anybody can take our courses one-off. If you see something that's special and interesting, feel free to sign up. And feel free to reach out to me on social media or my website too. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on this entire time. I just love experiences, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much.
Dennis, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing. That was all really good information. I, for one, feel like sometimes I need to dart around the world with my clipboard so I can like take notes about what was great and what was, really wrong with my experiences. I feel very in tune. So you've given me so much to think about when I go back out into the world and experience things, maybe with a new lens this time. So really fantastic. Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions. So first, you mentioned Disney so many times, and I know Disney really prides itself on the experience that they give their guests. Would you say, or if you wouldn't say, who pioneered this sort of experience design business? Was that a Disney thing, or was that sort of born out of just a pure need?
That's a good question. So Disney certainly is a leader in this because, they've got a film background, and they're like, let's make theme parks and experiences based, and apply what we know for film. And there's a story that, and I need to dig into if it's true. It's been, stories get told enough and they become truth or legend. But there's a story about Walt Disney, who, when Disneyland was opened, he would this is a sign of a different time. He would give a kid a chocolate bar and then have that kid eat that chocolate and whatever, and would follow along with the kid and their family from a distance. Again, maybe a different time. But when the guest got kind of sick and bored of that chocolate bar and the trash and didn't know where to put it, they would just drop it on the ground. And at that point, the story goes that Walt would motion to someone to bring a trash can out and set the trash can. And so the story is trash cans are 26 feet or something apart at Disneyland, because that is the distance by which someone gets bored enough of their trash that they throw it. And he would repeat that. Walt Disney would repeat that over and over again. So that's an example that's a very user experience design approach. And so user experience through these devices and usability certainly been around since computing has taken off. We've had computers in our hands, and we've done more user experience. Experience design, there's a few, and Pine and Gilmore, I think, have talked a lot about it. And then some other design agencies too have pushed it. And I forget, there's another writer who's been talking about customer experience. I'd have to pull his name up, I forget. But I think experience design has developed right around that 2000, when we turned from user experience efficiency to magic and special. I think Disney has always had that feeling for it because of hospitality, but we're seeing it far more widespread now as customer experience is a significant sector.
Great answer. Great answer. I think hospitality has a lot to do with the user experience. And yes. That makes a lot of good sense. Thank you for that answer. Okay, next question. And I think this is particularly relevant in the time that we're living in. So how would you ensure that we're designing products or experiences, in this case, that are inclusive to all individuals who will be utilizing them, experiencing them?
That's a great question. And I was sharing about building for everyone and Google's product inclusion team. A lot of that is co-creation and giving users and giving diverse users a voice and a significant stake in creating designed outcomes. So part of that is organizations and designers and leaders of organizations not thinking they're the expert and not thinking that they know best, but involving diverse groups in that design. And we see that two ways. We see that as organizations are becoming more diverse and are hiring a diverse work group diverse work groups where not just racial diversity, but I'm a research fellow with Scripps Gerontology Center. So ageism is a real concern. And oftentimes older adults are not involved in the design of outcomes. So having work groups that are represented and are comprised of very diverse groups, and then that co-creation idea that focus groups and other means of co-creation involve diverse users. But here's the magic, and here's the real caveat. We have to make sure that when we have diverse groups and folks on our teams, or when we co-create, we actually use what those groups created. And unfortunately, there are times when designers have paid kind of lip service, like, oh yeah, design with us or give us your suggestions. And then what resulted, they ignored those suggestions or have ignored, which actually damages that rapport, which is kind of awful. So it's embedding that inside our organizations, involving users and folks who use our design in co-creation, and then using and applying what we learn from those unique groups. And we start to see that change. We start to see our products, services, and systems representing our society as it actually is.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. That makes perfect sense. Let's see. This person is interested in how we can use experience design in education. She says, for example, like in the Office of Curriculum, where stakeholders are faculty, students, and staff, how would you suggest maybe this could work inside that?
So I'll give you an example. So when when you teach experience design, you kind of don't have an excuse not to use it. So here's two things I've done in my classes. I'll give you specific examples, then I'll kind of give a more general recap. In my courses, one thing I ran into with both my undergraduate and graduate students was a desire for them to try things and take chances. I wanted them to have a diverse, deep, and a dynamic learning experience. But that oftentimes doesn't come by them just like doing the assignment I gave them and trying to get an A. It comes from them trying stuff that scares them a little bit and could cause them to fail or not produce as good of an outcome. So in my classes, I have on many projects what's called a risk bonus. So learners in my classes on projects, I tell them, like, if you go above and beyond on an assignment, and when we're meeting for critique and talk about your work, and if you're trying something, I'm just like, ooh, Janice, this is really hard. I'm not sure this is going to work, but keep going. Like, I like where you're headed, and this is a candidate for a risk bonus. If it doesn't work out, you'll get a letter grade back. So the risk bonus gives you an entire letter grade back if what you did falls short. Also, I've implemented a thing called experience points. So this is a way, and talking about co-creation, a lot of times in my projects and assignments, I will not assign what learners must produce because the nature of experience design, we start with the people and we start with the complexity. So I will give students, I make them fill out an experience points report that they have to do experience points. And I tell them, okay, you get to pick the topic for your project. I'm going to focus you kind of on this area where we're looking at context or looking at design or examining people. But how far afield or how unique your project is in what you try. Experience points. Do you do an activity you've never done before? Do you work with people you've never worked with before? Do you go to a place you've never gone to before? Then you get a higher grade for being adventurous, for positioning your project a unique way. How can we do it in curriculum? Giving learners control, giving them options, still designing learning in a way that we hit the learning outcomes and that learners are prepared for careers or have information and knowledge and thinking and skills they need. But I've been working to find ways to give learners agency so they co-create their own assignment. And that's part of the learning too. So I think there are opportunities for us as educators to find ways so learners can be co-creators in their own learning and empower them. So what they make is meaningful to them. And then what comes out, I've found, is oftentimes beyond what I'd even ask in the first place.
Dennis, that's so exciting. It's so interesting to know how much experience is born out of the experience of the designer themselves and their sort of journey to the conclusion. That's pretty cool. Lots of questions coming in kind of fast and furiously here. Let's see. Are companies hiring more people focused solely on experience design, and in what other corporate roles would graduates excel?
That's a great question. Yes, they are. RGA is a large multinational design agency who in the last year, they said we're doubling down on human-centered design, which is a pretty common term in design. Experience design takes that to the next level. Human-centered can tend to focus on efficiency. But RGA has actually expanded their experience design offering and as hiring. So they are having more researchers, those who are working in different disciplines, and combining kind of an omni-channel approach. And that term omni-channel really applies to experience design. Not just screens, not just print, not just environmental design, but any kind of channel, any way that matches that need. Our graduates have gone on to be design researchers. We have some who come in as formal designers and then learn, man, I really like design research, and have gone on to be researchers. And there's definitely a need for researchers who can gather insights that turn into innovation for organizations and companies. And then actually we've seen in the last 5 years an explosion of experience directors or experience design directors or chief experience officer as that kind of corner office title, where organizations and corporations are seeing experience as a way for them to outmaneuver their competition, to provide services that can adapt as situations definitely have changed. We've seen that in the last year. So there's a significant need for those on the making side, on the leading side, as well as on that research side, as we pivot toward experiences driving design outcomes.
Great, excellent. Okay, so let's see. We're getting close on time, so I'm going to try to squeeze in just a couple more questions here. Let's see. So here's an interesting question that I'm not even sure, you'll be able to answer because it's not very concrete, but what forecasted innovations for the future, for example, the year 2040, do you think will be most beneficial to something like experience design? What excites you specifically about the future moving forward?
So one thing that really excites me is how experience design is finding a home in sectors where it really hasn't been in the past. I have a friend who was a design director and led a team at a hospital down in Houston, a cancer center down in Houston. Few designers that I know in the UK that we're seeing experienced designers and design researchers working in healthcare or being more involved in sectors that typically have not had, creative designers involved in their work. So one of those innovations, what I'm really fascinated by, is the fact that we have experienced designers with a creative as well as a very analytical and research background, have that combination, are being hired or becoming part of organizations like hospitals and others in healthcare. I'm interested to see how that will advance. And so experience design, one unique thing here is we don't really have a technology where I can say, I'm really excited about this device, and this is going to change everything. It is a way of thinking and doing. I think when it gets applied in these new sectors, when hoping we see it in more organizations and nonprofits, then we can innovate services and outcomes that can really affect change for users. So not necessarily technological innovation, but applying experience design in new ways. I think we'll learn a lot about this process as we see it show up in some new sectors.
So it too will continue to evolve, just like our experiences will. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to squeeze in this one last question because I think folks who didn't get their questions answered right now might be able to rely on this answer to go do their own investigations. Are there any professional associations of experienced designers to share best practices, or their industry specific ones that folks can sort of seek out if they're interested in knowing more?
Wow, that's a great question. And experience design is really emerging. But I'd say there's a combination. There's in the United States, there's the AIGA, which is a professional organization for design. And that group is expanding its offering, or expanding its member set into more screens and services, and certainly has expanded. Then there's also an SEGD. Some of you are like yelling at me right now what it is, but it's an experience design organization, a little bit more academic, but it's an experience design organization, SEGD, that involves more interior design and architecture. It's been heavier on interiors and architecture. I worked for an architecture firm for a little while too, and certainly architects and space designers are very interested in the experiences that take place inside their what they build. So SEG is a great organization. There's also IXDA, the Interaction Design Association, IXDA, that they're very focused on screens. So I guess my best answer is go to all of them and piece them together, because I think one of the challenges I've faced when we developed XD here at Miami is there really hasn't been a formal training for experience design the way we're doing it, where research is at its core, where we really hit that with research. And so I think organizations are still growing and still learning how to adapt, just like we are, because it's a fairly new approach.
Dennis, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And this certainly sounds like it will continue to emerge as, as folks continue to experience, well, now that we're re-emerging from our, quarantine cocoons, right. Maybe we'll see the world via new eyes. So I just wanted to encourage our viewers to go to xd.miamioh.edu for more information. And I think you can reach out directly to Dennis. I know there were some questions that we just cannot get to for lack of time. So hopefully you can take those directly to him. Dennis, we have really enjoyed your presentation today. And as a reminder to our audience, a recording of the presentation will be available on our website later today. Thank you again to Dennis Cheatham for leading us in our webinar today. Please check out our other new and archived webinar presentations at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and love and honor. Have a great day.